Now, there's masses of material in the series about the possibility of a lost civilization and presenting the evidence for a lost civilization. But ultimately, when you talk of a lost civilization, how did it become lost? What happened that took it away?
From real remnants of cities written of in ancient mythological stories to submerged structures that may or may not be natural formations. These are unbelievable ancient cities that scientists say shouldn't have existed. One of the most mind-blowing lost cities is Dwarka, an ancient city said to be submerged beneath the waters of the Arabian Sea. The legend goes that Dwarka was the home of Lord Krishna, and it was a grand city with incredible architecture. The belief is that Dwarka sank around 5,000 years ago, but recently scientists discovered underwater ruins that may place the city further back in history than they thought before. Archaeologists found what looks like streets, walls, massive stone structures, all under the sea. And what's interesting is that these ruins line up with descriptions from ancient texts. Some believe that the city was a center for trade and culture, possibly one of the most advanced civilizations of its time. These ruins could potentially be evidence of a civilization far ahead of its time. Some even think that Dwarka was a city with advanced technology, and that, kind of like Atlantis, it was all lost in a cataclysmic event like an earthquake or a flood. The lost city of Ubar, also known as the Atlantis of the Sands, described in ancient texts as a city of incredible wealth and power, Ubar was said to be located somewhere in the Arabian desert. According to the stories, the city was a trading hub known for its luxurious palaces and riches, but then one day it vanished, and supposedly it was swallowed up by the desert itself. For centuries, no one could find any concrete evidence that it ever existed. But in the 1990s, something amazing happened. Using satellite imagery and modern technology, scientists and archaeologists discovered what looked like the remains of a large city buried deep in the desert. The ruins seemed to match the descriptions of Ubar, massive structures, intricate roadways, but is it the actual city or something else altogether? There's still a lot of debate. Yonaguni, the sunken city off the coast of Japan. At least some say it's a sunken city. This place is wild though. It's an underwater site that was discovered in 1986 by a diver named Kihachiro Aritake, and what he found were all these massive stone formations that look like they could have been part of an ancient city. Steps, walls, and terraces all sitting deep underwater. But the thing is, no one can agree on whether it was constructed by humans or just natural rocks shaped by the ocean. Some people think it's the remains of a city that sank thousands of years ago, and saying that the stone formations look way too precise to be a coincidence, like there's no way nature could have made all these flat surfaces and stair-like steps on its own. On the flip side though, others say it is just natural erosion, nothing more than weird rocks shaped by water over a long period of time. And whether it's the remains of an ancient city or not though, Yonaguni still attracts divers and scientists from all over the world. At the end of the day, the place just looks cool. The lost city of Kalahari is one of the most interesting mysteries in African exploration. The story begins in 1885 when a Canadian adventurer and showman named William Leonard Hunt, going by Guillermo Farini as his stage name, ventured deep into the Kalahari Desert. On his return to the West, he published a book describing these strange rock formations he believed were ruins of a long-lost city. He even presented evidence to the Royal Geographical Society, including photos of what he thought were ancient structures hidden in the desert. Farini described the site as a desolate place with half-buried ruins, massive stones, and what appeared to be tombs or temples. Over the years, there were expeditions, with over 25 in 1932 alone, but none found any definitive proof of the city. In the 60s, a researcher named A.J. Clement proposed a new theory that Farini never actually reached the heart of the Kalahari. Instead, Clement believed the so-called ruins that he talked about were just natural rock formations that, due to erosion, looked like straight-edge stones and walls. But that's just his theory. Could there really have been a long-lost city somewhere in the Kalahari Desert? Akrotiri was found on the Greek island of Santorini. The city was completely wiped out by one of the largest volcanic eruptions in history. The eruption buried it under volcanic ash, which was horrific, but it also ended up preserving it like a time capsule. The city was incredibly advanced for its time. Archaeologists have uncovered well-preserved buildings with multi-story structures, advanced plumbing systems. The eruption, which scientists believe happened around 1600 BCE, left the city completely buried and its people vanished without a trace. And some believe that the eruption was the inspiration behind the legend of Atlantis, with its advanced civilization being swallowed up by the sea in an instant. Agartha is said to be a hidden advanced city deep beneath the surface of the earth. The idea comes from ancient legends, but it really became more popular in the 20th century, especially with people who are into esoteric beliefs and conspiracy theories. It ties into the hollow earth theory quite a bit. Some people think Agartha is an underground utopia where highly advanced civilizations have lived for thousands of years. The story goes that Agartha is connected by a network of tunnels that stretches all around the planet. Some say it's home to ancient beings with knowledge and technologies far beyond what we have. Stories about Agartha usually involve lost civilizations, UFOs, and secret government cover-ups are also said to be involved. Some believe that famous explorers like Admiral Byrd might have even visited, and that the knowledge of its existence has been suppressed for one reason or another. Troy, made famous by Homer's Iliad, is one of the most legendary cities in ancient history. The stories are packed with gods meddling in human affairs, heroes like Achilles, and of course, that famous wooden horse. But aside from all the fantastical elements, archaeologists believe that there's some truth behind the myths. Rustem Aslan, the director of excavations at the site, says, "I believe the Trojan War was a historical event, just not the kind that Homer described." Over the last 150 years of digging at the site, researchers have uncovered that Troy was occupied for over 4,000 years. During the Late Bronze Age, which lines up with the time Homer's Trojan War, the city's inhabitants were clearly preparing for something big, most likely a war. Now, while we still haven't found definitive proof of the epic battle described in the Iliad, Aslan is confident that it's out there, buried deep under 65 feet of dirt. So even though the gods might not have played a part in it, the city itself was a real and powerful place. Alright, so not really a city, but a mythological castle and court. Camelot, a legendary castle at the heart of the King Arthur tales, is a name that most of us recognize from Hollywood films and stories that have been retold countless times. King Arthur, the noble king, and his band of knights are the stuff of legend. But the question is, was Camelot real? Well, over the centuries, historians have dug into this. In 1542, poet John Leland suggested that Cadbury Castle in Somerset might be the real Camelot. Why? Well, it's close to the River Cam and villages named Queen Cam and West Camel, which seems like a pretty close link to Camelot. And during the 20th century, archaeologists dug into that area. Their findings were pretty interesting. They found evidence of a settlement going back to the 4th millennium BCE, and a major fortification built around 470 CE. It was massive, the largest of its time. It seemed to fit the story of a powerful ruler, possibly Arthur, fortifying his kingdom, but not everyone buys into the Cadbury Castle theory. Some historians think that the site was built too late to match the Camelot of Arthurian legend, and other places like Cornwall and Huddersfield have also been theorized as possible locations for Camelot. El Dorado is one of the most famous legends of all time, and it all started with a story about a tribal chief. So back in the 16th century, the Spanish explorers heard about a leader who would cover himself in gold and jewels and then dive into Lake Guatavita as part of a ritual. He was believed to be the key to untold wealth, and the story quickly grew in the minds of the Spanish, and what started as a tale about one man became a search for an entire city and then a whole empire said to be filled with gold. The Spanish couldn't get enough, and they scoured the lands of modern-day Colombia, Venezuela, and Brazil, convinced that they'd one day find this golden city, but they never found a trace of El Dorado. That doesn't mean the legend was completely made up, though. There are records of an Incan tribe near Lake Guatavita who had a ceremony where leaders would drop gold and jewels into the water as an offering. It's possible that the original legend about El Dorado was based on this ritual, and over time, it just got wildly exaggerated into the search for a city full of riches. Sadly, the Spanish pursuit of El Dorado led to the destruction of many indigenous tribes too, as they searched for a place that might never have existed in the first place. Göbekli Tepe is one of the most mind-blowing ancient sites in the world. Found in Turkey, it's a massive archaeological complex that's over 12,000 years old, making it older than Stonehenge or the Great Pyramid. It's a giant ceremonial site with massive pillars, some weighing up to 20 tons, and detailed carvings of animals like snakes, boars, and foxes. This wasn't just a place for regular people to live, it was more of a religious or spiritual center. Scientists believed it was built by hunter-gatherers, not advanced civilizations. The fact that people without farming or settled communities could create something this sophisticated does change what we thought we knew about early human history. What makes it even more mysterious is that after it was built, it was intentionally buried around 8,000 years ago. No one really knows why it was buried or who did it, but it's kept the site hidden and preserved for thousands of years. The site's original excavator, Klaus Schmidt, believed it was ritualistically refilled, but it turns out that's probably not the case. More recent studies have shown that it was most likely the result of landslides. With all that said, I've been your host James. I'll catch you, yes, you specifically, in the next video.